Okay, as folks are filing in, hello and welcome. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Welcome tonight. Thank you for taking some time maybe away from the Phillies game. I've heard that they're playing tonight to watch our Philly region Salt Watch kickoff. Really excited to have everyone here today. And this meeting will be recorded. So if you want to go back and watch it, or if you have to leave early, that's really fine. It will be on our YouTube channel. Before we dive into the presentation, I have a couple of poll questions that I'd love for everyone to answer. And I will be sharing these results at the end if we have some time. So the first question that I have is, how did you first hear about or get involved in Saltwatch? I'll give you probably about a minute to answer this question. How did you first hear about or get involved with Saltwatch? And if for some reason you can't answer it on the poll itself, you can answer that in the chat. It should be open to everyone. Give you about 20 more seconds to answer this question. How did you first hear about or get involved with Saltwatch? Also, for those of you who have not yet met her, Maggie is joining us tonight. She'll be sort of our chatbot for this webinar. She is our Mid-Atlantic Save Our Streams coordinator. So I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. Maggie, if you want to introduce yourself, please do.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name's Maggie Dombrowski, and I'm the Mid-Atlantic coordinator for our Save Our Streams benthic monitoring programs, and also doing a lot with Saltwatch as well. So I can also be a resource if you have any questions or needs in the Mid-Atlantic. So happy to be here.
Thank you, Maggie. So everyone, welcome. This is our Philly Region Saltwatch kickoff. I'm going to kick us off for this webinar, and then I'm going to kick it over to some of our panelists who will talk about some of the regional initiatives that they've been involved in with the Saltwatch program, and maybe some advocacy actions they've taken locally. So I'm really excited to hear some of the things that they've done in the past and some of the things that are ongoing or happening here in the future. I'm not going to spend too much time going into a background of the program, but I will share some of the results that we've gotten over the years, and especially from the last couple of years, and just a brief overview of the program, but I won't dive in too much because I know many of you have probably heard this spiel many a time, especially if you've been monitoring with us since the beginning, as some of you have. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Abby Heilman. I'm the Saltwatch coordinator here at the Isaac Walton League of America. The picture that you see here on the screen is probably a familiar scene to many of you. I'm sure many of you have seen something similar to the image on the left, where there's just a lot of salt, maybe too much salt piled, where you can see it visibly and you can feel the crunch underfoot. There's a lot of misconceptions around how much salt to apply and when to apply it. But I think we can probably all agree that the picture on the left is a little bit too much road salt, or a lot too much in many cases. A little bit of salt really goes a long way into both reducing the amount of ice in an area, and a little bit of salt goes a long way in polluting waterways and the environment really permanently. So the photo there on the right is actually how much salt you need for a 20-foot long driveway, or about 10 sidewalk squares. A 12-ounce mug, or your typical coffee mug, holds enough salt to salt a 20-foot long driveway or 10 sidewalk squares, which is about 2 parking spaces. Salt actually needs space in order to work, so those granules should be spaced out about 3 inches apart for it to be the most effective. And You've probably also seen some lines that are sprayed on the roadways during the winter time. That's a salt water solution called brine. And that is sprayed in a wet dry pattern as well, for it to work most effectively for traction. So in any case, when you're applying salt, it does need to be spread out. Just really a sprinkle will do. Because salt does have a lot of different impacts. It impacts our wildlife, especially our freshwater aquatic wildlife, like oh my goodness, I cannot speak today. Macroinvertebrates, benthic macroinvertebrates, as well as some fish and amphibians, really anything that's used to a freshwater environment. It's not used to then having that environment become salty. Salt does impact our infrastructure, our roadways, our vehicles, our bridges, our pipes, our appliances, and it can impact our drinking water as well. Most wastewater treatment facilities or water treatment plants, they don't have the infrastructure or the funding to actually be able to remove salt from the water. And so it does end up in our drinking water. It's not something that can simply be filtered out. So folks who have hypertension and who are on really low sodium diets, they might not realize that they're getting additional salt from their drinking water. So that can be a really big problem as well. So it can lead to many health concerns. It does impact habitats, especially those that might be planted near roadways or sidewalks, like turf grass or native plantings. Trees can be impacted from some of the overspray from salt in the wintertime, and pets can be impacted as well from walking on salty surfaces. Their paws can get abraded and dried out, or if they lick their paws after a walk, they can get sick from that and become dehydrated and things as well. So lots of different impacts from road salt. So think of some of the things that maybe if this is the first time you're hearing about this issue, what of those things are things that you care about and you want to protect, and learn more about how to protect those things, and that'll help you and help us to protect all of the things here on the screen. And as I said earlier, it only takes a little bit of salt to make a big impact. Salt, once it enters the environment, there's really no feasible way to remove it. So it only takes a teaspoon of salt to permanently pollute 5 gallons of water. And salt that you're buying at the store normally comes in a 50-pound bag. So a 50-pound bag of salt can permanently pollute 10,000 gallons of water, which is about the size of a residential swimming pool. So again, just a sprinkle of that salt will do to keep us safe during the winter time. And I did want to mention too during this slide, we are not looking to permanently remove salt from the equation. We do need salt to stay safe in the wintertime, but we can be a lot smarter and more mindful about our salting practices. In 2018, our Salt Watch program was launched with a number of goals. The first being to raise awareness in the general public about the connection between salt and stream health, to identify chloride hotspots in fresh water, and then also to advocate for smarter salt application by sharing some of those results with private landowners and local and state agencies. And the way that we do this, we start this out by our Salt Watch kits, which many of you I'm sure have used in the past, or maybe you'll go and request one of these in the future, which would be great. And these Salt Watch kits, we mail them directly to your address, whatever address you provide on our form at saltwatch.org. And each Salt Watch kit includes 4 test strips to test for chloride, which is a component of road salt. There's instructions for how to take a sample, instructions for how to upload that data, and then there's also that sort of white piece of paper that you see there on the right-hand side of the screen is a conversion chart to convert the units on those test strips into chloride. So we send out these Salt Watch kits in hopes to learn more about the data in our own backyards from local waterways, or even our tap water too. You're more than welcome to use Salt Watch tests to test your tap water as well. And we really couldn't do this program without the help of our partners. So across the country, we officially have 64 official Salt Watch partners and somewhere between 500 to 600 participating organizations in this program. So it's really grown throughout the years. And I know our partners here in Philadelphia were some of our first partners here for this program. So I always love doing a webinar for you folks in Philly because you really helped kick us off in a great direction for this program. So we're really thankful for that. To give you some data that we've received over the years, so since the inception of the program in 2018, we have received over 22,000 data points, and that number is rising every day with more data submissions. If you're looking at the map there on the left, you'll notice a bunch of dots. The larger the dot on the map or the circles on the map, the more data we've received from those areas. And then the color of those dots corresponds to the chloride concentrations that we're seeing in those regions. As you'll notice, especially the further north you get, in more metropolitan regions especially, you're seeing a lot more orange and red and some yellow in those regions. Most of that is because there's a lot of impervious surfaces like concrete and pavement and sidewalks. And so those are more surfaces that people can spread salt on. And it also is something that doesn't really allow the salt to sort of seep into the soil. So more and more of that salt sticks around and those chloride concentrations go up, especially as those areas are the ones that get hit with a lot of winter storms needing salt in the wintertime. So the colors of those dots also correspond with the concentration, as I said earlier. So if you look then to the data breakdown on the right, 27% of those samples came back as excellent, which is between 0 and 30 parts per million. 30 parts per million is the lowest our strips really sort of show when you're taking a sample. So below the test strip range, 27% are excellent, 41% fair, so something that we can see on the test strip range, but might be kind of elevated. 19% are poor, so between 100 and 230 parts per million. It is said sort of nationwide that freshwater waterways naturally can have chloride in them up to 100 parts per million. In many areas, that number is lower than that. I know Maryland and Ohio are around 50. I think Pennsylvania is around 50 as well. We can come back to that here in a minute, or hear more during our national webinar in November. We'll have somebody from Stroud Water who does a lot of research in Pennsylvania about that. But anything above that 100, we definitely know is anthropogenically sourced. And then 13% have been toxic, above 230 parts per million, which is toxic to a lot of our freshwater aquatic life. So more quick data breakdowns for you. Zooming into Philly, so between 2018 and 2024, we received over 1,000 data points. 5% of those samples came back excellent, 38% fair, 40% poor, and 17% of those samples were toxic. Last year's data that we received, which the data that you're seeing here on the screen is from July 1st, 2023 to the end of June 2024, we received 225 data points, 9% excellent, 36% fair, 40% poor, and 15% are toxic. And then for this year, which was the beginning of July until today, we've received 13% within the Philly region, or 13 data points within the Philly region, 15% excellent, 23% fair, 54% poor, and 8% toxic. All of this data then is going into the Clean Water Hub, which is our national water quality database. We tried to make it so it's really publicly accessible and created with usability in mind. The data in the hub is meant to be really easy to access, understand, and share. And we do have a couple different color-coded interactive maps to help with some of those visualizations. The data that goes into the hub, some of it is shared with the US EPA annually, especially our Virginia Save Our Streams data, which if you have questions about that, feel free to ask Maggie towards the end of this talk tonight. And our data is available to different government agencies and water quality organizations. For the Salt Watch program specifically, we're using it to really identify some of those areas of further study, places that have hotspots, chloride hotspots that we need to learn more about. But different organizations can also use the hub's data to track best management practices, restoration, and some other things as well. Internally and sort of externally facing, we use this data for our annual report through the Isaac Walton League as updates to volunteers and outreach to social media and just media sources. And then you can use this data as well because you are all here as clean water advocates. You can use this data to back up your letters to the editor that you might write, or for contacting local representatives, or for just educating members in your community to teach them about road salt pollution, because a lot of people don't even know that road salt is a pollutant. So lots of great uses for this data. And that's what we're here to talk to you all about tonight, is really not only going out and getting that data, but what do you do with it afterwards? How do you use it? So I'm going to stop really quickly here for another poll question. I'm going to go ahead and launch this. So what have you done beyond monitoring? Some examples that we have written in here: talk to a neighbor, maybe you have reduced road salt at home, written an LTE, which is a letter to the editor, submit an action alert, go to your local town hall, something else. What are some things that you have done beyond monitoring? Maybe to let other people know about road salt pollution. So I'll give you about a minute to answer that. Carly, and I do see your comment there in the chat. If I don't touch on that question, I think if Erin is still around towards the end of the webinar, I think, is going to talk a little bit about some of the salt piles that they found this winter at Wissahickon Trails. I don't know if you were part of that conversation or not, but we will definitely touch on that before the end of the webinar. So we'll swing back to that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. If you're still typing, please feel free to put your answer in the chat, because I do want to hear all of your answers, but we do need to keep moving on too. So thank you for those of you who answered that question. We are trying to be a resource to get that data not only into the hub, but also to use that data then to create some sort of action. We know that everybody's at a different stage. Some of you may just be getting started with your monitoring. Some of you may have been a monitor, might still be a monitor, and are looking to do more. And some of you might have already done some advocacy actions, like what Charlie mentioned in the chat, of sending in pictures of some sites that he found last winter in Montgomery County. So taking that data, using our eyes to see really what's happening around us, and then trying to do some sort of advocacy action. And we're really here to help. We're here, again, to be a resource. And any action that you take is great. Actions as simple as reducing your road salt use at home, or talking to your neighbor, or doing some crazy stuff like Jeffrey, I think, will be talking about here in a little bit, like testifying at the Philadelphia City Council about road salt. Maybe it's not that crazy. We'll hear from him here in a little bit. Maybe you've written an opinion piece to the Washington Post or filled out an action alert. The action alerts, by the way, if you haven't heard of them, you can sign up for them on our webpage. Maggie, I think, might be able to find a link for you here. But the action alerts are anytime that we see some legislation around road salt pollution reduction, especially at the state level, we'll send out an action alert, and basically it helps you figure out who your legislators are in your region, and we have sort of a pre-written letter that is editable that you can send then to those legislators to let them know to support different bills behind or about road salt pollution reduction. So different things like that. And Maggie just put that link there in the chat. If you want to sign up for action alerts, especially ahead of the winter season, you can do that. So again, there's so many different actions that you can take. Hopefully we'll hear about quite a few of them this evening. So stay tuned for that. But before we continue, one more poll, and then I think I have one more after this. So only 4 polls tonight. This poll is a multiple choice. What is a Salt Watch action you plan to take this year? So writing a letter to the editor, that's the LTE, writing a letter to the representative, talking to your neighbor, reducing salt at home, or maybe there's some other actions that you have in mind. Please write those into the chat. We'd love to hear from you. And there's so many different actions that you can take. Yeah, Lisa has a good comment here in the chat. I'm wondering if sometimes the data gets skewed towards bad by us volunteers, i.e. we don't sample much until we start seeing big piles of salt. Would it be better to set a plan ahead of time and stick to it? With the nitrate program, that's what I do. Then again, we only get so many test strips, so we want to make sure they capture issues. Yeah, so and I think Jeffrey will talk a little bit more about this, and probably Ryan and Kevin and Aaron as well. But in an ideal world, we would love to see folks monitoring once a month, year round, for the Salt Watch program. Many of you who have been with us since the beginning know that we used to be called the Winter Salt Watch program. A couple years ago, we actually dropped the winter because we realized that it's really important to test for chloride pollution year round. So we are just Salt Watch because we want to see what's happening throughout the year, not just in the winter time, but you can still test during the winter time to see if you are seeing some of those spikes in chloride after winter salting events, because chloride pollution isn't just from road salt. There's other pollution sources. In the Twin Cities region, the sort of majority of chloride pollution is actually from water softener discharge. And so they probably wouldn't see those spikes in the winter time unless there is some additional chloride from road salt application. But we would love to see folks monitoring year round, once a month around the same time each month. And then if you wanted to monitor additionally during the winter time, you can do that. And feel free to keep requesting Salt Watch kits. If you run out of your test strips, request more. We're more than happy to provide those, especially if you're submitting that data. So thank you for those of you who have answered that poll question. We had 40% of you say you're going to write a letter to the editor. That's awesome. 20% write a letter to a representative, and then 40% other. So get informed and connect with other advocates. And that's a really great answer. And that's what today is about, is we're really starting this conversation. This is the start of the conversation, not the end. And we want to work together to come up with solutions for your region. And as I said earlier, we want to be a resource. We have on our webpage at saltwatch.org under the What You Can Do page, we have different fact sheets about road salt pollution and chloride in drinking water, chloride in infrastructure. We have different flyers that you can print out or hand out, or even just see if you want to learn more about the pollution issue and some really easy things that you can do to reduce that pollution. We have an advocacy guide specific for Salt Watch, and it has information about different groups that salt and really how to start some of those conversations with some of those different organizations like HOAs or for hire road salt applicators who do private contracting. We have information about departments of transportation, some template letters to representatives. All of that is in our advocacy guide online. We do have some Spanish resources as well, as template letters to representatives and letters to the editor. We also have some different toolkits. We just, within the last couple weeks, released a toolkit for faith-based communities. You can find that on our Saltwatch Gaithersburg webpage. For our Isaac Walton League chapters, and this works really well also for different watershed organizations who are trying to get involved with Saltwatch as well. And then some event toolkits like our Paint the Plow event, how to run a successful Paint the Plow event. This was something that we did last fall, and Pennsylvania, believe it or not, a lot of the through PennDOT, you can get a plow sent to a local school for students to paint. I believe you do have to paint, supply all of your own paint, but they do have a program in place for something like that already in your state. So something to look into if you're really interested in watershed art. And then we do have a new resource. It is on our webpage. It's a letter to the editor and op-ed guide. So some best practices for writing letters to the editor and op-eds. So last poll question for the night, and then we'll be done with polls here. And this poll question is, what could help you leap the hurdle of going beyond monitoring and complete some sort of advocacy action? So maybe there's a resource that you need to help you out to sort of go beyond monitoring. What is that resource? How can we help you out? Give you about a minute to answer that. And Maggie has put some links to our What You Can Do page and then also our faith-based toolkit, just because the faith-based toolkit isn't on our main web page. It's on a sort of a side page that we have. So all of that information's there in the chat. Give you about 20 more seconds to answer this question if you haven't already. How can we help you to sort of go beyond monitoring and complete some sort of advocacy action? And that can be something as simple as gaining the courage to talk to your neighbor or learning more about how to reduce salt at home, any of those things. Or it can be, how do I write a letter to the editor? How do I have this conversation with some sort of applicator? Or what do I do if I find a salt pile? Who do I call? We'd love to hear your answers. 10 more seconds. Okay, thank you all for answering that. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. If you're still typing, please put your answer in the chat. we'd love to hear what that is. Okay. Locally, in our Montgomery County of Maryland, I know we were talking earlier about how it's confusing. There's a Maryland and a Pennsylvania and a Virginia Montgomery County. In Montgomery County, Maryland, we do a number of tabling events throughout the year. This weekend, we're actually going to Gaithersburg Oktoberfest. So we try to meet people where they're at, put signs out like no clean water, no good beer. We also do a number of farmers markets throughout the year, especially in the winter time. We do different things like hiking events where we do sort of a walk and talk and monitoring hike as we go. Our next one is actually this coming weekend as well. We also offer some different applicator trainings, especially for private for-hire road salt applicators and different business owners or managers or HOA board members to learn more about smart salting and some of the ways that they can actually save money and protect the environment, and protect sort of infrastructure to come in the future as well. So we do offer some trainings locally as well. And again, as I said earlier, we do try to meet people where they are. So here's some sort of memes that we've put together for our social media. If you're interested, you're welcome to go to our Facebook page, Save Our Streams IWLA, or our Instagram at Save Our Streams. So just some more ideas of how to sort of do some advocacy on social media is another opportunity. And just to sort of end on this, there's a number of ways, as I said earlier, a number of actions that you can take to reduce road salt within your community. Some of the easiest things to do are to do it at home, to start at home. So shovel early and often to clear those walkways before snow turns to ice, to scatter salt. Again, a 12-ounce mug holds enough salt to treat a 20-foot long driveway or 10 sidewalk squares, which is about 2 parking spaces. And you can actually sweep up any excess salt. Maybe there's a little spill or a pile, or maybe a storm has passed and there's still salt on maybe a dry sidewalk. You can sweep that salt up, store it in a closed container, and use it during the next storm event. And that's a really easy way to save yourself money, and to reduce the amount of salt going into the environment. And oh, I did want to let you folks know as well, this winter, January 27th through 31st, put this on your calendar, is Winter Salt Awareness Week. There will be a number of different states involved. I can't remember off the top of my head if Pennsylvania is doing anything specific for Winter Salt Awareness Week this year, but it's something that was started by Wisconsin Saltwise in Wisconsin. And this is becoming a yearly thing, and it is a national week. So some organizations are writing city proclamations to proclaim this as sort of their Winter Salt Awareness Week. But there's a number of different state and national speakers throughout the week. And then that Friday, the 31st, they're hoping that states do sort of more of a monitoring day and get media involved. So that could be a really cool event for you folks in Philly to do. And I can share more information about this week as more information becomes available as well. So thank you all so much. I'm going to kick it over here in a moment to Jeffrey Selling, who's one of the volunteers at Tucanee Frankfurt Watershed Partnership. And he's going to share some of the advocacy actions and things that he's done throughout Philadelphia. So I'm really excited to hear him talk and our other panelists. If you have any questions or would like to see some resources, we do have those available at saltwatch.org. And please feel free to email me at saltwatch@iwla.org. But this webinar continues. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Jeffrey. Oh, you're on mute again, Jeffrey.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, what a lot of good resources, what a dynamic presentation. It's quite exciting to just think about all that you guys have done to help us. I'm going to just start out before I say anything about myself and what I've done, sharing my screen if just a minute if I can. Wait a minute, I'm not getting what I want. Let me try this again. Hold on a minute. I'm not seeing my screen come up when I try this. Just a moment. Frustrating. Because I created a whole set of slides for this. And when I click on, am I doing the wrong thing here? Share screen. I should be seeing my own screen that I can then click on, but I'm not getting it. Well,
Is it open in a different window?
just a minute. Oh, yeah, just a moment. I'm still try this again. I think I found a different thing to click on. Let's see if this works. Nope, I'm not getting it. Well, I'm not going to waste everybody's time. I'll just do this without my pictures. What a bummer. I wanted to start with, before I even say anything about myself, yesterday's SALT reading. And you were talking, Abby, about the fact that you're actually not winter salt watch anymore, but just salt watch because you're encouraging people to do this year round. We've been doing this at Rock Creek in Curtis Arboretum. I have this lovely picture of this beautiful little creek where I've been a creek monitor now for almost 9 years. It's hard to believe it that long. Yesterday's salt reading, so this is really current information, was 211 parts per million. This is October. No one's put any road salt down in Montgomery County or in Cheltenham Township where this, the reading was taken for, at least since February. And yet here we are up in the almost toxic range, certainly in the bad quality. So this really is an issue. And this reinforces it. I was also going to show my screen just the readings we've had over the years with Salt Watch, and almost always we are in the red or the orange. We're not even yellow. We're in the red or orange most of the time. Our average, I would say, is somewhere between 180 and 220, year in and year out, month in and month out. It's pretty shocking. So this really is an ongoing issue. It's pretty clear that the salt is not just being put down on roads. So much has been put down that it's now gotten into the soil and into the groundwater and into roadside areas. So when every time it rains, more of it washes in. So my name's Jeffrey Selling, and I'm a retired science teacher from, oh, you put mine up there. Yeah, you can see. Oh, thank you. That's pretty good. Well, you can just see we have two big spikes years ago, but I'm not looking at them. Just look at the normal color of those dots, and you'll see the best we are most of the time is yellow, but most of the time we're up in that orangey, moving towards red range. So that's just that's what we're facing. That's why this is such a big issue. And we're facing it in our little Curtis Arboretum with this pretty creek and all that. So I'm a retired science teacher from Germantown Friends School. I've been a stream keeper for about 8.5 years, and I volunteer at Curtis Arboretum with a group of people. We're trying to restore the riparian buffer there. And I've kept my affiliation with TTF as a stream keeper and do monthly monitoring, of which the salt's a big part of that. And I want to just say a little bit about my history of collecting chloride data and what's happened along the way. One of the things we were encouraged to do early on was take pictures, and that's why I wanted to show you a few. I'm afraid I can't. I don't know why I'm not able to share. I'm going to just try one more time to see if, nope, I don't know why I'm not being able to share. So for some reason, I can't share my screen. But I had a number of pictures taken around my neighborhood of just big piles of salt. And then I actually had a picture that was on one of your slides, Abby, of the Benjamin Franklin Parkway downtown in Center City, Philadelphia. It was up on one of your slides there. That was taken at the 2018 Women's March in the middle of January. And looking down the parkway, which was blocked off, you could see everything because there were no cars because of the march. And here was this huge pile of salt. Yeah, and if you look in the upper right-hand corner of what Abby's showing, that's the picture I took in the Women's March there. And you can just see that huge amount of salt in this very public area on what is probably Philadelphia's, most important boulevard. And there it is. So I took some of these pictures, I sent them to my city council people, I sent them to some state representatives and things, and you know what I heard back? Nothing. So what a surprise, and kind of discouraging. And so at that point, I began to realize that doing my 4 salt tests each year, which in the very beginning we just did the 4 that were part of the sort of the winter salt watch program, just didn't seem like enough to me. And my work partner, Krista Peterson, and I really wanted to do that. We wanted to go beyond that and take some actions, which is what Abby was talking about a moment ago. We didn't want to just say, here's the data, isn't it terrible? We just felt like, okay, we want to try to, reduce the salt use. One of the first things I did was send an email to we have an East Durham Street, it's the street I live on, a neighbor's email group. And there are people from about 9 blocks on it. It's sort of a 3 blocks of Durham Street and then on either side of it. So I posted some pictures, some information, and the bit about using the salt mug of salt to cover most of our sidewalks, is most of us have just, maybe 8 to 10 or maybe 12 sidewalk blocks in front of our houses. This is not an area of mansions. And in fairness, this is an extremely progressive neighborhood. If you walk around now, you can imagine what political signs you are seeing and which ones you're not seeing. And so people are very responsive to this kind of thing. And I got a lot of feedback. People say, I didn't know that, but that's good. I'll be more careful, blah, blah, blah. So that one felt pretty good. And it was pretty easy. And I send that every year now, just, a little reminder, because people forget. And there is this mindset that more is somehow going to be better, because it is in some things, but not with salt. And then I did write a letter to the editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Spent a lot of time on it. They have this 200-word limit, which is really tough to meet. And then I just started counting, and I realized I got under I was 198 words, I think, 199. And most of the letters there are 300 or 400, and they do publish them. But I wasn't smart enough so I had to clip my letter way down. And again, I got a few neighbors emailing me saying, well, that was a nice letter. And, kind of end of story. And I had no sense that it did anything other than just kind of ripple through the air, and probably a few people in the city saw it and said, oh yeah, that's probably a concern. But I don't know that it changed a lot. I think it would take quite a groundswell of letters and other messaging to really change things. Then I had a chance to organize a project with the Master Watershed Steward Program of Penn State, of which I'm one of the Master Watersheds stewards for Montgomery County. And we did a project where a whole lot of stewards collected data and did the salt testing, and we sent it in, and so that added more data points for that year. But again, it didn't do much about responding. Then when TTF was asked to testify before City Councilman Isaiah Thomas's hearing about salt, I was asked to do that, I think only because the staff were all busy with other things that day. It was a very interesting hearing. Most of the people were from PennDOT, Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, SEPTA, the Southeast Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, a lot of very kind of official government-y people. And I was really struck at how sympathetic they were to this issue, how concerned about the amount of salt in the water, because their fellow government people have to try to manage that in water treatment. And so they're dealing with it, and they're having to deal with the infrastructure problems of rust and corrosion and all that. But they also spoke about the catch-22 they face, and I thought this was interesting. The public in general is increasingly of the belief that weather should not stop us from anything. When there's snow or ice, people just feel like they should be able to go to work, they should be able to take their kids to karate lessons, they should be able to go to their book group or go to a Flyers game, whatever it is. And if the roads are not passable, it's the government's fault. Of course, some of those people also probably complain bitterly about regulation and taxes, but it's really easy to blame the government. And so these people working for PennDOT and SEPTA who deal with this are really struggling with this. On one hand, they know what is supposed to be, and they know about best practices, and they're concerned about it. I was really impressed, actually, by the PennDOT people. But then there's a huge public pressure on them, and that's who they're accountable to make sure that people can get where they want right away. And there are some very hilly neighborhoods in Philadelphia, in the Roxborough region. And they pointed out that a lot of the people who live in those areas are not salaried people. They're wage earners. They work in stores as clerks, as shelf stockers. If they don't get to work, they don't get paid. and that affects, their ability to, pay their mortgage and put food on the table. So it's really a different thing. I was a science teacher. If I got a snow day, I just stayed home. Well, actually, I had to go in and feed my science room animals, but I didn't have to work. I still got paid. I got my benefits. A lot of these people don't get that. And so puts a lot of pressure on PennDOT and SEPTA to keep the roads well salted, even heavily salted, so that traffic can go, these people can get to work. So they're really caught. And it was an interesting thing, just hearing that at the hearing, because I not only testified, I listened to everyone else's testimony. Just a comment about salt piles. Here in Montgomery County, there's a big Target and Home Depot complex, and there was an enormous pile of salt out behind it. I assume it was the county's. It was about 4.5 to 5 feet high, completely exposed. And people in my Curtis Arboretum work group, we called that into the county 4 different times over 8 weeks. And it took 4 calls before it finally got dealt with. So it's really hard to get action. We persisted and we did get action, but it took a lot of action. And every time it rained or snowed or whatever, a lot of that salt would go right down into our little rock creek. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit about what I discovered, that a lot of the problem is coming from shopping centers and parking lots and strip malls. And they don't necessarily have the mindset that PennDOT did. They're not really as aware of the water pollution issue. And I had a really interesting picture of a supermarket here with a salt truck applying. I was just over there getting some milk or something, and this guy goes by with salt just pouring out of his truck, and he got to a lane crossing, and there were 3 cars on the next lane, so he had to stop and wait there, and he left the salt applicator on. So while he stood there for about 25 seconds as these cars went slowly by, the salt was just pouring out. He didn't shut it off. So by the time he was done, the picture looked quite a bit like that photo Abby showed of the salt cup with the salt just whitening the ground. Interesting, that was just for a forecast of a possible freezing rain. It never did freeze for that incident, for that situation. We never had rain, never got down below 32, interestingly, at that time. So all that salt was there, and it was there for weeks. Until the next rain actually happened. So I went in and spoke to the store manager about it, and he very quickly said, I am not the one who deals with that. You need to talk to the company owner. Well, the company owner, is big chain, doesn't even live in this area. And so from there, I got batted to the property manager. It turns out that a lot of these big box stores and smaller stores too are on property they themselves do not own. Big real estate companies own that and lease that to Home Depot and Target and ShopRite and all these stores. And the people who own it don't take care of the salt or the property. They hire property managers to do that, who are supposed to keep their costs down. The property managers, in turn, hire local people to do the applying. There's not enough snow and ice in the Philadelphia region to have people who do that full time. So these are garden centers. These are people who just have pickup trucks who can buy a kind of a salt holder that has the applicator on the back, stick it on their pickup truck. And when there's snow or ice, or the threat of that, they can go out and just apply. I had an encounter with one of these guys about 15 years ago. We had a 30-inch snowfall here, and my wife and I were out shoveling our parking strip all day, and we still weren't done. A guy came down the street with a plow and a salt thing on the back, and we hired him to just finish clearing for us. And I got to talking to him. He was a policeman in one of the suburban counties, and he happened to be on a week's vacation, and he was so glad it was because he jumped into his truck, loaded up with salt, and put his plow on the front, and he had been working for 40 hours continuously, plowing and salting, going around, finding places that wanted that done. He hadn't had any sleep. He said he hadn't even had a meal, just a few cups of coffee and a donut. And he was trying to earn enough money to go to the Super Bowl. But what was interesting, this guy had no training, no background, but all sorts of stores and individuals who had bigger properties hired him to plow and salt. And so a lot of the applicators are just small people who have a truck or, as they say, a landscape company that delivers mulch in the summer. And they do this, when there's snow. It's a way to pick up a little extra money. And they don't do it for environmental reasons. They just and they go as fast as they can to as many places as they can, and put down what a lot of property managers want is a lot of salt, because they're terribly worried about being sued. And even the ones that are somewhat concerned about environmental issues, the being sued is, if they don't do that, the owner of the property is just going to fire them or yell at them, and they don't want to have that happen. So, and I'm mentioning this not to be pessimistic, but just to say how many layered this is. And how complex and how hard it is to have a real effect on how much salt actually gets distributed. It's easy to do that with your neighbor, much harder to have it on an institutional or a strip mall wide or a community wide basis. And so as I think about that, the two things that stick out for me is the things that I think might really change this are a massive amount of public education on many different kinds of platforms, brochures and TV shows and news announcements and community bulletin board type things, and then a lot more government regulation with enforcement. I mean, even if regulations were passed, if they're not enforced, like so many environmental regulations are not a lot is going to change. If the guy came and plowed and did some salting on our street with his truck, is he really going to, cooperate unless there's some teeth to the rules? Probably not going to. He's probably not going to bother. Figure no one's going to catch him. And so it's a really complicated set of issues. So collecting the data is wonderful, and but then figuring out how to have a real effect on the community is really tough. And as I say, I'm trying to do the little things I can do, but I'm sensing that it's a really big ask. So thank you.
Jeffrey, thank you so much. I honestly couldn't have said that better myself. There's so many stakeholders within the issue around salt, and there's so many knowledge gaps too, especially. And not only knowledge gaps, but there's a lot of fear and misunderstanding behind road salt too, about how much to apply, when to apply it. And like you said, a lot of people just don't want to be sued. And so that can be a huge factor as well. New Hampshire has a program that's, I think, was launched in 2013. It's called the Green Snow Pro program. And it is a certification training program for applicators who want to learn more about road salt application. But then anyone who takes that training, passes the certification, and maintains that certification, maintains those best practices that they learned during the certification program, and keep records of their practices throughout the winter time, those folks and anyone who hire them are actually eligible for free limited liability protection against damages or slips and falls. So that's sort of the gold standard that we're really hoping that a lot of places go towards. Minnesota and Wisconsin the last couple of years have tried to get a similar bill to pass at the state level, and I'd love to see Maryland do this. We're just launching, Maryland Department of the Environment this year is just launching, for the first time last year, they had the applicator training, a training program at the state level that'll be pretty similar to some of the trainings that we've seen other states do. So we're hoping once something like that gets established, we can do that as well in Maryland. And I'd love for something to take place in Pennsylvania too. So looking at some of these other states and seeing what they're doing and seeing if that's something that could be implemented in Maryland or in Pennsylvania as well. So,
Abby, just one thought to go with. I think what's exciting about that New Hampshire, I didn't know about it, is that it's incentivizing good practice rather than punishing bad practice. And people are just, if they get something for it and something valuable like liability insurance, that's liability coverage, that's something. That's really, so that's a great model. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, so sort of that carrot versus the stick approach. The more we can incentivize people to do better and to smart salter, the better. In a lot of cases, when we're sort of giving people the opportunity to take some of these trainings, really telling them, hey, some of these other companies have saved up to 30 to 70% of the salt that they would normally apply in the year by using some of these best practices. And that saves you money as an applicator company, but it also can save businesses money in the long term too, because their sidewalks and parking lots aren't going to get damaged as much by all of this salt that's being applied and sort of corroding that pavement. There is a question that's in the chat that I do want to answer before I turn it over to Ryan. One of the questions was by Judy. So what alternatives to salt can be offered? Because we know that salt has a lot of different impacts. There are some different alternatives that people use. Maggie answered in the chat, calcium magnesium acetate or CMA. That's an organic product that some folks are using. And that is something that a lot of people are sort of going towards. Honestly, the best practice right now is brine solution. So that salt water mixture, it's about 20% salt, and the rest is water. It is something that is less concentrated than that rock salt. It's something that is directly sprayed onto the roadways, so it sort of sticks to the roadways. It doesn't bounce off as vehicles are flying by or people are walking. So that's one of those things that is currently a best practice. You can't use it in every situation, but you can use it in a lot of cases, and you can apply it up to 48 hours in advance of a storm event as well. So brine is something that is reducing the amount of salt going into the environment. There are some other sort of emerging things that people are using, but expense is a big factor. It might not be as effective as road salt. The temperature that it works at might vary depending on what product that you're using. So what we are asking for is just to be smarter about the amount of salt that we are applying. If you're applying things like cinder or grit or sand, anything that we're going to apply has some sort of impact on the environment. If you are applying sand and things, that's not going to melt any snow or ice. It's going to create traction, which you will need whenever the weather conditions get below 15 degrees Fahrenheit, where a lot of our salt, like sodium chloride, does not work. But you still need to sweep some of those things up because it can create some stormwater impacts later down the road. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ryan Newman, because you've heard me speak for way too long already tonight. He's from Tacony Frankford Watershed Partnership. So Ryan, if you're still here, you're welcome to go.
Yep, still here. Just give me a second to get this set. Okay. So, hi everybody. My name is Ryan, again from Tacony Frankford Watershed Partnership. For anybody who's not familiar, we are an environmental nonprofit based out of Philadelphia. We also do work in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, in Cheltenham, Abington, Jenkintown, and again, we do stuff in Philadelphia as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just what we've been doing from the time that we started doing Salt Watch back in the winter of 2018, 2019 to what we're working on now, and a little bit of the progress that we've been making with that. So the TTF watershed, for anybody who's not familiar, is a 30 square mile watershed. Again, it encompasses part of Philadelphia as well as the suburbs in Montgomery County. So we started participating in the Salt Watch back in, and Kevin can correct me if I get this confused, back in the winter of 2018, 2019. So I think starting in like November-ish of 2018, bleeding over into January, February 2019. You can see the map here then, that is just all of those points from the Salt Watch back in 2018, 2019. So we really just asked volunteers then to go out during the winter and grab samples during storm events. So we had a little bit of participation the first year. We continued working with volunteers from 2018, 2019 through until now. But starting in the spring of 2022, we started partnering with the Stroud Water Research Center to do a little more intensive sampling, not during the winter time. So we began doing what's called a chloride blitz. So really what that is it's just volunteers or just interested people out to all sample at one specific time during the non-winter season. So that could be spring, summer, fall, during base flow conditions. And everybody goes out, gets samples from specific points. They would bring them back to a meeting point. We would analyze them then for chloride using test strips, and then also conductivity using a calibrated meter. So the first event that we did again was in the spring of 2022. We had 10 different sites. We had a few different volunteers. We really just focused on looking at some confluences to see what smaller tributary streams might be an issue. So that was really one of our main purposes with the chloride blitz, was to get a sense of what the salt levels look like outside of the winter time, but also to help identify and pinpoint a little bit further down which stream segments might be an issue. So again, this is building off of some of that winter salt monitoring that volunteers have been doing. We had some rough ideas of some stream segments from the winter salt watch where we were seeing some high numbers. We were looking to get better clarity outside of the winter season for that. So we continued doing chloride blitzes then up through the spring of this year. So spring of 2024, we hosted one. We had them 2 in 2022, 2 in 2023, and then we had the one here in the spring of 2024, really just adding more sites and more volunteers as we went to get more specificity in our samples, to really try and pinpoint down to even smaller sections of stream where some chloride issues might be. So you can see this map here on our right is a map from our spring 2024 sampling event. I think this sampling event maybe had somewhere in the 30 to 40 sampling point range. The most samples we took at one time, I think, was 41. But again, really just trying to drill down the specificity. So we identified a couple segments of stream in the watershed that really had more severe salt issues. So generally across the board, since we are suburban Philadelphia, we're pretty well developed. There's not a ton of green spaces or open spaces. We saw a pretty high baseline chloride level. Most of our stream segments are sitting around like 100 to 120, 130 was a normal level we would see in our watershed. We did not really see anything that was closer to like the 50 range in terms of samples. But again, that has a lot to do with a lot of development on top of a lot of these smaller stream segments then. So a couple points that we identified then. So this one in the middle of the map here, the Shoemaker Run, we have some continuous monitoring on. That has some extreme wintertime spikes, has high levels throughout the year. So here is Rock Creek then that Jeffrey mentioned, having a pretty consistent high baseline readings as well. And then over here is a smaller tributary to another one of our creeks that we had just recently started to monitor that has some higher levels. The top of the map here, though, the headwaters of Bader Creek, which is one of the highest tributary streams in the watershed, is really what we're going to focus on today, and where we started to look more deeply into what those readings mean, what the causes of them are there any easy solutions, those types of things. So just to explain this map a little bit more, so this is a map that we've compiled from just the sampling events, where it breaks it down into a less than 50 milligrams per liter of chloride, or parts per million, sort of interchangeable, would be closer to a natural level. The 50 to 120 is a elevated level, but we're not at a stress threshold. the greater than 230, which is the red, is based off of the EPA's chronic exposure limits where it affects aquatic life. So if the levels are above 230 milligrams per liter for longer than 3 consecutive days, then it starts to have an effect on aquatic life, which in many cases, as we've seen from some other states in their regulations, might even be too high for a lot of our things living in the stream as well. So we're not going to get lost in the weeds of that, though. We're going to continue through them. So here then is the focus that I had just mentioned. We had really started to dive into is at the headwaters to Bader Creek, which is one of the larger tributaries to the Tokenie Creek, which is the main body of water in our watershed. So had one volunteer this year who had just came on and joined some of our chloride blitz, and really he had just recently retired and taken on a bigger interest this year again in helping us to figure some things out. So when we did our spring chloride blitz, you can see all the map points here, but he took about 20 or 22 different samples for this sampling event. The area here of the headwaters to Bader Creek. So what you're seeing here are 2 tributary branches in the main stem a little bit further down. Both tributary branches start on the Abington School District property. So we have the high school, the junior high school, and then we also have a municipal lot over here, and we have an elementary school. Municipal lot has fire training, salt storage, compost as well. So a lot of different things happening at the headwaters to this creek, contributing a lot to the creek, which creates a really complex issue then. Previously, before this was like school district property, it was a farm, and before that it was most likely wetlands, given some of the things that we have seen in some historical photos and whatnot as well. So again, this volunteer, super interested, local, wanted to do a lot. He had taken like 20 samples at this event. He has continued, we've been working with him of taking samples regularly. So he has his own handheld conductivity meter that we supplied him, and he's probably taken over 1,000 different readings over the last, 3/4 of a year along this section of stream. So all different times, all different days, really trying to pinpoint what are some problem segments, specifically in these headwaters, that might be contributing to why we're seeing such high levels of salt and high conductivity readings. Breaking that out a little bit, so our chloride readings are again telling us how much salt is in the water. Conductivity is related to chloride. We look at it when we establish a relationship to give us a better understanding of what the chloride levels are. Conductivity is a little bit easier to measure than chloride. So I'll mention that we're collecting both of those numbers. They both tell us a little bit about salt. Conductivity can be a little bit confusing because if there's other things in the water, that can also have an effect on conductivity as well. So as a result of all of this intensive sampling that this volunteer has taken, we have been working with our partners over at Temple University. They've helped us a ton in giving us some logger support. So we have installed 3 continuous loggers in the headwaters. You can see the 3 stars here. The red star is actually going to be the furthest left sampling point, is actually moving over to the red segment as well. So the township is actually letting us move a logger over onto their property to further study the effects of the township lot. So we have these 3 continuous loggers. Temple has also supported us by running some samples. So this volunteer has been getting grab samples, so water samples from various different points in this headwater section of stream. Temple's been analyzing them for us and getting us back some results on them. So we have gone from, originally with the winter salt watch, realizing that there might be an issue here, to then doing the chloride blitz, where we were looking more thoroughly into some of our segments of stream. We said, hey, this is a bigger issue. We're starting to pinpoint some spots. From there, we've moved to some grab samples, collecting them, using these continuous loggers to really focus in on a few points. So the left segment of stream and the right segment of stream are really our biggest problem issues. This middle star here is more of a control almost. I don't want to say it's a full control in that it does have some influence from the property and has elevated levels above what is normal, but in relation to the other two sections of stream, it has a much lower level. So here you can see some of this continuous data then. So this is just looking at some of the continuous data from August until about mid-September. So we've been collecting data since I think early July here. And this is looking at conductivity. So again, related to the salt, but not a direct measurement of salt, but we are getting some water samples here and there. We're doing some test strip samples as well to corroborate with this conductivity data. We are consistently, though, the top right here is going to be the star that was to the furthest right there. We're consistently seeing a conductivity level of somewhere between 13 and 1400 microsiemens per centimeter. And from water samples that we've collected and from test strip data, we've seen that that's correlating to over 300 milligrams per liter of salt. Then this other graph here at the bottom left, that is going to be that middle star then. So we are seeing a continuous conductivity level of around 700 microsiemens per centimeter, which correlates to around 120 milligrams per liter of salt from what we've seen. Again, you can only really make an accurate assessment in terms of the relationship between conductivity and chloride when you've gathered a lot of samples and established a thorough relationship. We're not quite there, but we are starting to get a good sense of what these levels look like. And then the bottom right here is going to be the far left yellow star. We were consistently sitting at about between 1150, 1250 up to 1300 microsiemens per centimeter there. We were seeing some salt levels around 300 milligrams per liter there as well. So both of those two outer edge sampling points exhibited some pretty extreme levels of salt contamination then. So just to wrap it up here, so again, findings, results, sort of future directions. So we've really focused in then and identified these 2 points within this very small area in the headwaters of Bader Creek, which is contributing to the larger watershed then, where we have a sense that these two stream segments, there is a lot of salt entering our stream through these two segments. It's a really complex issue. So we are going to continue to monitor through the winter to chart some spikes that we see to try and get a better sense of where the salt is coming from. So again, between us, the volunteer who has been fantastic, and Temple, we've really been trying to get a sense of what the issues are, but it's a really complex issue based off of all of the land use around it, all of the inputs. Suburban systems are very complicated. There's not easy to say salt is coming from this one specific parking lot and that is the only issue. But on a positive note to that, the volunteer has been engaging with the township. The township has been super responsive, has been taking some action, has taken an interest in the monitoring. And it seems like it's been a really positive direction in terms of education. Again, the volunteer has been the one really reaching out to and talking to and establishing the relationship with the township. He's been out there talking to the guys at the maintenance yard a lot, talking to people further up in the township, and really, again, as in most things with advocacy, people only get tired of hearing from staff level people eventually. Him being local, talking to these people in the township who work local, it seems like he's really been striking a chord with them and getting somewhere. So they have become a little more invested in the monitoring and thinking about and understanding what we're seeing. So that's sort of where we're at right now. Not a lot of general things, or not a lot of specifics, a lot of generalities, because they are working through some stuff and they will have their own story to tell when they get there. but a little bit of a positive note and a journey from where we went from just collecting some winter data to some more intensive monitoring where we're really trying to figure out what contributes to some of these issues and how we can go about starting to think about solving them. So that is pretty much what I have. Open to any questions now.
Does anyone have any questions for Ryan? The fantastic presentation, especially about all the data that's you're collecting throughout the region and some of the great things that are happening and going to happen too. We'd love to see all of that. Okay, if you have any questions for Ryan, please put those into the chat. I want to kick it over to Kevin. I know we're starting to run out of time here. We have about 15 minutes left. Oh, okay. Come back, Ryan. Quick question. Has the township changed any practices? Oh, you're on mute.
I started the video, did not start the audio. Yeah, they've been working through some stuff. They are like actually taking some action on some stuff. So again, nothing set in stone currently. Not for me to say per se. But they are taking some action to potentially solve some issues. Again, it's sort of a long process. And not necessarily something where I'm going to say exactly what they're doing because it's not set in stone, but also again, it's for them to sort of say.
Yeah, but certainly starting those conversations is really, really important. Dave, Bell, do you want to, I think I can put you off of mute if you want to talk a little bit. I know you've been speaking a lot with the township. So you should be able to talk if you want to unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, I actually met with the head of Public Works a couple of weeks ago, and he tells me that they've changed their practice as far as when they salt. Now, if it's less than 2 inches, they only salt in areas where they really feel they need to because it's a steep road or for whatever reason. He said that also most of their trucks now have computerized regulators for applying the salt. He also, I had seen before that they only put bales out in front of their salt shed in the off season from April to October. So I previously asked, well, if those bales help keep salt from getting out of the shed area, why don't you just do it all year long? It's only like half a dozen and you got the manpower. So then he told me, oh yeah, we do that now. And he kind of tried to take credit for the idea, even though I had suggested it to him before and he adamantly, thought that that was not doable. The other thing is that he I first complained to him about their salt practices 5 years ago when my street and the next street over were covered with salt. I know, Abby, you've seen those pictures, and he's still insisting that the truck just hit a bump in the road, even though there are no bumps in the road around here. So he's still denying that salt event that really got me involved. And finally, it's in the township budget for next year. They're spending about $250,000 on a salt truck washing contraption. So the idea is that when the trucks come back in, they wash it off, and that water then, that salty water is contained. Some of the salt they manage to remove, but then the rest of it gets discharged into public sewer system. So some of our sewage goes to Philadelphia, and that gets discharged in the Delaware River. in an area where the water is brackish already. The other part of it goes to the town's treatment plant, which discharges into Sandy Run, a tributary of the Wissahickon, and that's where they're going to put this salty water. So they, even though they've congratulated themselves and congratulated me for making this happen, they're actually taking salt from one watershed and putting it in another one. So whether there's any progress there remains to be seen. I don't know that they're actually interested in, in figuring out how much salt is in that water that goes to the treatment plant and how much salt then gets into Sandy Run. But that's something for future investigation.
Thank you, Dave. That was a great update. It's good to see that they are taking some steps, even though maybe not everything is exactly as we want it to be. They are starting to take some of those steps. So I don't want to run out of too much time. I do want to kick it over to Kevin and Charlie at the end. I will answer that question that you have in the chat about the salt piles too. So Kevin, I'll kick it over to you with some updates about your program.
Hey, thanks, Abby. Thank you, everyone else, Ryan, Jeffrey, Dave. I don't have too much to add. I'm just blown away with all the work you guys have done. Jeffrey as a volunteer, that's incredible. And the work Ryan and his crew has done. It's just really cool. Jeffrey touched on some of the struggles that this program has faced. And yeah, that we've absolutely faced them, from the townships to the the HOAs to the kind of strip malls that we learned in 2018 all the way at the beginning are the ones that are the heart of this problem. Essentially, is they're afraid to get sued, and we're kind of full circle. We're right back there, but I think that's a good thing. We needed to do all that work in the last 5 years to get right back to where we're at. We figured out what the problem is. We kind of know where it's coming from. We know what everyone's kind of thoughts on this is. So I think those last 5 years were very beneficial to this cause, and we're moving in the right direction. And like I said, we needed those last 5 years to get to where we're at. So now that we're here, it's a really, really cool place to be. So the Pennypack Trust, we have been working with Ryan at TTF and sending our volunteers to them to say, like, can we figure out where the problem's coming from? And then can we use like volunteers like Jeffrey and Dave to then advance it to the next level? And well, TTF and those volunteers have proven that we can do that and get that conversation to the next level. So that's why the Pennypack Trust hasn't done chloride blitzes and things like that. We wanted to see if it worked with Ryan and using those volunteers in a specific and concerted effort, if that makes sense. So now that we're here, I think that was the right move, and Ryan and his team have done an incredible job. And now we have the help from Stroud Water Research Center. We have the help from Temple. We have the help from Isaac Walton League. Now we have a great partnership. We have the community involved. Now, like Jeffrey said, we need to increase the education, the outreach across multiple platforms, and just keep this ball rolling so more people know about it. Because if we didn't start this 5 years ago in this partnership with Isaac Walton League, well, we wouldn't be 5 years down the road and that many hundreds of people wouldn't know about this. So we're in a really good place. We have great partnerships. The Isaac Walton League has put together a great package of resources. And as long as we continue to work together like we are tonight, I'm excited. I think we're moving in the right direction to tackle this big problem. So yeah, I just kind of want to finish up with that I think we're moving in the right direction. Keep telling your neighbors, keep teaching the students, and let's keep working together. And I think I can send it back to Abby.
Thank you, Kevin. Erin, if you're still on and if you're available, I'd love to give you some time to speak. Erin is currently on maternity leave, so we're really happy that she's able to join us here tonight. We weren't sure if she was going to, so there's the little one right there.
Yeah.
So hopefully doesn't wake up, but
Yeah, I can just talk for like 1 or 2 minutes about our role. Wissahickon Trails, we do connecting land, water, and people in the Wissahickon Valley. But I am mostly just echoing what other folks here have said tonight. So Right now, we have our Creek Watch volunteers, which is very similar to the Stream Keepers and the Pennypack and TTF. They do salt watch every winter and some of them monthly. And so we have that data collection ongoing here. We have also partnered with Temple University, who is such a great partner, and we have 3 continuous monitoring for chloride, 3 locations where we're doing continuous monitoring for chloride in our watershed as well. Right now, they're monitoring 2 specific waterways, one of which is the Prophecy Creek, which is considered, like historically considered, our cleanest or least impacted tributary to the Wissahickon Creek. So we're kind of still looking at the data and Temple's supporting us in monitoring and looking at the data. We also have not done the chloride blitzes. The TTF is really the leader in that and doing great work. Charlie, who is on this call in the spring, has been an amazing advocate in this area. And Jeffrey got into a lot of the challenges which he spoke to so well, especially for these private landowners, speaking with them and educating them and getting them good resources to make them care about environmental impacts. And a lot of times it's just having multiple people or multiple organizations kind of like bugging these different organizations to try to change their practices, which people may or may not be receptive to. So it can really be a challenge. But Kevin spoke so well to the momentum we have in partnering together, and we are really excited to work with everyone. So I'm going to pass it back over to close, and I am loving some of the questions and discussions that we're having, which I think are really valuable. So I'm going to pass it back to Abby we can use the time for questions or anything like that.
Thank you so much, Erin, and we're so glad that you're able to join us tonight too, and to see the little one. It's very exciting.
Thanks.
So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. And I just want to sort of echo everything that everyone said here tonight, that we have been sort of rolling with these partnerships and sort of gaining momentum as we go. And this is not the end of the conversation. We're trying to bring more organizations together to start this conversation for people who haven't even heard or thought about road salt as a pollutant before, and to really work together, not just in our own little worlds, but to work collectively to reducing road salt pollution in our area. So this is really that time right now to start this conversation, and it certainly will not be the end. Is there any communication to entities on proper storage? That's a great question. Does anyone want to answer this before I jump in? Because I know, Erin, you guys were working a lot this winter on some salt storage issues and calling people quite a bit.
Yeah, so so one of my goals is to develop like a handout that we can distribute to people, but it can be really difficult. I think Abby, in the chat, you were talking about some of the specific regulations. And so it can be really difficult to get into the regulations on a state and local basis to figure out what exactly is mandatory, what is best management practices and are encouraged. And so I think that is a really big next step that would be super valuable in the Wissahickon and likely beyond, is to make some of those materials to be easily distributed. So that is something that I am working on.
Yeah, and like Erin said, it's kind of a tricky situation because everything is regulated differently, whether it's sort of the county or the township or different municipalities, or even the state might have different regulations. And some of those regulations might only cover public road salt applicators and storage for public entities like PennDOT or other departments of transportation. And some might cover private, but a lot of them might not cover private. So it's really starting those conversations, trying to find some of the regulations that might exist, or trying to start those conversations to maybe develop some of those regulations and looking at regulations in other states and communities, and trying to maybe steal some of the wording that they're using to use that to create something for your local area. Charlie, could you elaborate on that a little bit more? What are the DEP PA folks saying? As far as the salt storage, is that? I can take you off of mute here.
Yes, I guess, does that work?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I guess I see these inappropriate salt piles that are uncovered or washing out from underneath into storm drains and wetlands and creeks and such, and found it shocking. So I think, some kind of information, communication, attention to the issue, whether it's in sort of the business pages of landscape things or institutional management or whatever, local papers or online forums or something. It seems like there needs to be some different awareness. I mean, when I found one, I was shocked, and without looking, when I found four more in the course of a week or so, I was just astonished.
Yeah. And different entities regulate that too. And that's another sort of piece of the puzzle that's sometimes hard to find. In a lot of places in Maryland, there's some stormwater folks, usually who are part of a Department of Transportation, or part of like a city or township. And so sometimes those people can sort of do like code enforcement on that, but it sometimes varies from place to place. So finding that specific information for your area is going to be the key to solving that. But noticing those piles and starting those conversations about those piles and figuring out who the person is to contact, whether it's that business specifically or if you can figure out who the applicator is, those are some of the key pieces to the puzzle that will solve that. But it's not necessarily the easiest, most straightforward path. But it is something that you can do. So those are some really
Right.
good questions that you've brought up.
I guess ended up thinking that the report to the state was the best to let them figure it out and problem solve from there and direct people to what would be appropriate.
Yeah, I would say the closest you can get to that is the better. Because sometimes it might not be something that's regulated by the state, but it might be a county or township regulation. And so if there's like a local Department of Transportation person, or I don't even know, maybe the Fish and Boat Commission could be involved in something like that too. But a lot of times there might be somebody who is dealing with an MS4 permit, and it could be like a township advisor or someone that you could report that to. So I'd say like cast a wide net if you come across a situation like that. And Aaron and
Okay.
Kevin and Ryan, if any of you have any additional advice, please feel free to jump in too. But cast that large net and just sort of keep hounding people, because a lot of times these situations, they don't resolve themselves on their own unless all of the salt dissolves from the pile or it gets used. So really starting that conversation and talking to a bunch of different people about it is the key. And
Okay.
that's really how our program started too, is there's a really large road salt spill outside of our national office headquarters in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and we didn't know what to do about that road salt spill. And we figured that nobody else would really know what to do or even realize that that was a pollutant too. And so that's really what started off the Salt Watch program. But I think that is something that we should have more conversations about, is trying to maybe create a resource specific for Philadelphia that could have some of that additional contact information to get some of those piles cleaned up if you see them. So thank you. I know that we are a little bit over time. I did want to share some of these poll results with you folks. So if you do need to leave, I totally understand, because we're at 7:35. So again, if you need to go, I totally understand. But I think some of these answers can be really valuable for us. So how did you first hear about or get involved with Salt Watch? Different trainings, so TTF Streamkeeper training, a conference, I think it was Delaware River Keepers, the Pennsylvania Master Watershed Steward Program, a township newsletter, talking to a friend, email sent, and penny pack streamkeepers. So a lot of those, especially online and virtual materials, are working to get the word out about Salt Watch. The next question is, what have you done beyond monitoring? So have included that we're participating in grant requests. That's awesome. If you folks are looking at different regional grants, feel free to contact us as well. We'd be more than happy to write a letter of support for some of those grants, especially if you are participating. And I'm more than happy to talk a little bit more about that as well. Some other things beyond monitoring, I've talked to a few friends about it. Once I saw a huge pile of excess salt in my neighborhood, and I called the township to pick it up, and they did. So that's awesome. Submit reports to Department of Protection in Pennsylvania about inadequately stored salt piles. That's awesome. Talking to others, great. We'd love to see all of that. So thank you all so much. And the last poll that I'll go over, what could help you leap the hurdle of going beyond monitoring and complete some sort of advocacy action? I'm very occupied. I need a volunteer to do the sampling. I had another webinar earlier today, and they said the same thing, pretty much: time. We all need a little bit more time, so I totally understand that. Another one, I'd love to talk with others directly in my area. Is there a way to pull together small groups of volunteers for this purpose? Yeah, and that's a conversation that certainly can be had. I know Ryan does a lot of blitzes throughout the year. Talk to Ryan or Aaron or Kevin, or email me, and we can certainly figure something out. The more the merrier. Another one is local info and support network. Yeah, we talked about maybe trying to come up with a resource for some salt piles, what to do if you find that, and a support network. That's what we're all here for, is we're here to try to support each other through this program and sort of continue it beyond into more advocacy. And then the last one is, we gave you the info you needed. That's awesome. The LTE and op-ed templates. So that's great. So please feel free to visit our website, saltwatch.org, especially under the What You Can Do page for a lot of those resources. But again, this is not the end of the conversation. This is just the start. And we're really hoping that having these conversations, especially today and beyond, will really snowball sort of the knowledge about this issue, and more people will get involved and really learn that salt is a pollutant and learn what they can do to reduce salt at home and also within their community. So thank you so much. If you have any additional questions, I'll hang out for a little bit longer if you want to put those into the chat. But I really want to thank all of our panelists here today. I love seeing you guys every year. So it's great to see you on this kickoff. And I'm so excited for just all of the amazing work that you're doing in Philadelphia, and looking forward to seeing what happens in the future too. So thank you all so much, and don't stop this conversation, start this conversation. So thank you all so much for attending.
Thank you, Abby, so much. I mean, and to you and Isaac Walton, because of course we couldn't do this program without y'all's support and like starting it. So
Yeah, well, thank you for all of your great work, and thanks for popping off of maternity leave to
yes,
come hang with us tonight too. It was great
yeah,
to see you.
yes, I'm gonna hop off, but
In
thank
the
you
little-
everyone for attending.
Bye, Erin.